counted them last night. 14 footsteps. From the hallway outside my bedroom door, across the landing, down to 3 stairs. Then silence. I have lived in this house for 8 months. I know every sound it makes. The pipe knock in the bathroom wall at 2 a.m. The way the kitchen window rattles when wind hits the east side. The particular creak of the 3rd stair from the bottom. The 3rd stair from the bottom. Last night, whatever was walking through my house stopped on it, and then it waited. My name is Claire Ashford. I'm a 31-year-old graphic designer who bought a small Victorian terrace house in a quiet neighborhood because I wanted space and quiet and a life I could call entirely my own. I work from home. I live alone by choice. I value my solitude. Or I did. Before the footsteps started. This is everything that happened in the order it happened because I need someone else to read it and tell me I'm not losing my mind. And because if something happens to me after tonight, there should be a record. It started 6 weeks ago on a Tuesday. I remember the day because I'd had a difficult client call in the afternoon and spent the evening trying to decompress. A long bath, a book I wasn't really reading, a glass of wine I finished too fast. I was in bed by 11 and asleep by 11:30. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. I know the exact time because my phone was face up on the nightstand and the screen had just lit up with a notification, an app update, something meaningless, and the light caught my eye as I surfaced from sleep. I lay in the dark for a moment, orienting. The house was quiet. I reached for my phone to dismiss the notification. That was when I heard it. A footstep. One single footstep. From the hallway directly outside my bedroom door. The sound of a foot. Weight shifting floorboard, compressing and releasing. Specific and unmistakable. Not a settling sound, not a pipe, not the house adjusting to the night temperature. Upgate its footstep. The kind a person makes. I lay completely still. My phone was in my hand, my thumb was on the screen. I did not move. Nothing followed it, no second step, no other sound. The hallway was silent. I told myself old house, Victorian construction, floorboards that swell and contract with changes in humidity. I had read about this when I bought the place. My surveyor had mentioned it in the context of minor repairs, nothing structural, just character. Character. I lay awake for an hour. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I fell back asleep. In the morning, over coffee, I had almost convinced myself. It happened again on Thursday, 2:20 a.m. Not one footstep this time. 3. Spaced in the rhythm of a slow, deliberate walk, heel, transfer, toe, moving along the hallway. I sat up in bed. I turned on the bedside lamp. I stared at my closed bedroom door. The footsteps stopped when the light came on. That detail destroyed the floorboard expansion theory. Floorboards don't respond to light. Whatever had stopped when I turned the lamp on, it had stopped because of the light. Because it knew. I got up. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. The landing was empty. The stairs, visible from where I stood, were empty. I turned on every light on the upper floor and stood at the top of the stairs and looked down into my living room, my front door, my kitchen beyond. All of it visible, all of it empty. Nothing. I checked every room. I checked the wardrobes, the spaces under beds, the bathroom. I checked the locks on every window and both doors. Everything was secured. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, and there was no one in my house. I sat on the edge of my bed until morning. The following week it happened 4 times, always between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Always the same hallway, always stopping when I turned on the light or made a sound. And always, I noticed this only on the fourth occurrence when I was paying very close attention. Always moving in the same direction, toward my door. Hey, NeuroFear family, drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and what time it is. Is it late? Are you alone? We read every single comment. And if you haven't subscribed to NeuroFear HQ yet, hit that button right now. Claire's story is just getting started. I bought a motion-activated security camera on a Saturday morning, the way you buy something when you've run out of other explanations and need to do something concrete with the fear. It was a small device, mountable, with night vision and a 30-second clip trigger on any motion detected. I positioned it at the end of the hallway, angled to capture the full length of the corridor from the bathroom door to my bedroom door. I set it up, connected it to my phone, tested the motion trigger with my own hand, confirmed the night vision worked. I put a strip of tape across the bedroom door frame at shin height to see if it was disturbed. I was being methodical. I was being rational. I was building evidence. That night, a Sunday, I lay in bed with my phone beside me, the camera app open, monitoring. At 2:31 a.m., the footsteps began. I heard them clearly, in the same slow, deliberate sequence in the hallway. And I watched my phone screen with absolute attention. The camera did not trigger. I lay there listening to footsteps in my hallway, while my motion-activated camera, aimed directly at the hallway, registered nothing. No clip, no notification, no motion detected. The footsteps continued for 40 seconds. I counted, then stopped. In the morning, I reviewed the overnight footage. The camera had recorded 3 clips, one at 11:47 p.m. when I'd walked to the bathroom, one at 4:08 a.m. when a moth had apparently fluttered past the lens, and one at 5:52 a.m. when the hallway light began to change with the coming dawn. Nothing at 2:31 a.m. Nothing during the 40 seconds of footsteps. The tape across the bedroom door frame was undisturbed. I sat on the hallway floor with my back against the wall, and I tried to think about what I knew, factually and without embellishment. And what I knew was this. My house contained sounds that were consistent with a person walking. Those sounds occurred at a specific time each night. They moved purposefully. They responded to light and noise. And they produced no physical evidence whatsoever of their existence. I called my sister that afternoon. She suggested a carbon monoxide detector. I already had one. It had not triggered. She suggested a sleep study. She suggested stress. She suggested I was working too hard and spending too much time alone. I thanked her and ended the call and stood in my kitchen and listened to my house breathe around me and felt, for the first time since it started, genuinely frightened. 3 days later, I knocked on the door of the house to my left. My neighbor there was an elderly man named Gerald, who had lived on the street for over 30 years and who I knew only from occasional front step exchanges. The weather, the bins, a parcel taken in on my behalf. He answered the door in a cardigan and looked at me with an expression I read, at the time, as pleasant neutrality. I asked him, keeping my voice casual, if he knew anything about the history of my house, whether anyone had lived there long term, whether anything unusual had ever... He shut the door, not rudely, not with alarm. He simply looked at me for a moment after I said the word unusual, and then he stepped back and closed the door quietly and completely. I stood on his step for a moment. Then I went home. That evening, I searched the address of my house in every public database I could find. Property records, local news archives, planning permission history. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I found it in a digitized local newspaper archive from 11 years ago. A brief article, 8 paragraphs. The kind of piece that newspapers run when the story is too small for the front page, but too significant to ignore entirely. A woman named Dorothy Hale had lived in my house for 23 years. She had been found by a welfare check, prompted by a neighbor, Gerald, I realized, reading the quote from an unnamed adjacent resident after she had not been seen for 2 weeks. She had died in her sleep. The cause was natural, cardiac arrest, age 78, and the article was respectful and brief. Dorothy Hale, 78. Natural causes. Nothing sinister. Nothing that should have stopped my blood cold the way it did. Except for the last paragraph, which I read 3 times. Neighbors remembered Mrs. Hale as a private but kind woman who had lived alone since the death of her husband in 1999. Several described her habit of walking the upstairs hallway in the early hours of the morning. A lifelong insomnia routine she had apparently maintained until her final days. After I read that article, I did something I am not entirely proud of. I stopped trying to explain the sounds away. Not because I suddenly believed in ghosts. I am not, or was not, a person who believes in ghosts, but because the alternative explanations had exhausted themselves, and the energy I was spending on rationalization was leaving me with nothing for the thing I actually needed, figuring out what to do. So I accepted as a working premise that something was walking my hallway at night. Something that had walked it for decades before I arrived. Something that responded to light, produced no image on camera, and moved in the pattern of an old woman who couldn't sleep. What I had not accepted was what happened on the night of the 5th week. The footsteps changed. They had always moved along the hallway toward my door and stopped. Always the same route, always the same tempo, like a recording on a loop, playing out the ritual of an insomniac's 2 a.m. walk. On the 5th week, they reached my door, and then they went past it. I was awake. I was almost always awake by this point. Light, vigilant, half sleep that shattered at the slightest sound. And I heard them reach my door, and I sat up, and I heard them continue past it, down the landing, toward the small room at the end of the hall that I used as a home office. The room I'd cleared out and repainted and filled with my desk and my monitors and all the tools of my working life. The footsteps stopped outside that door. And then, soft, almost gentle, the sound of knuckle against wood. Something knocked 3 times. I did not sleep at all that night, or the next. If this story has you checking over your shoulder, like this video right now, and subscribe to Neurofear HQ so you never miss a single story. Hit the bell, all notifications. You need to be here for what comes next. My home office had been Dorothy Hale's bedroom. I established this from the property listing photographs I'd saved when I was buying the house, the estate agents, photos of the previous layout, before I'd moved things around. The room at the end of the hall, the one with the window overlooking the small back garden, the one with the slightly uneven floorboard just inside the door that I'd always meant to fix and never had. Her bedroom. Whatever walked the hallway at 2 a.m., whatever had paced those boards for 23 years, for decades, in the grip of insomnia and the particular loneliness of a long widowhood, it was walking toward where it had slept, where it had spent the last years of its life. And now something had changed. It had walked past my room, past the stranger who had come to occupy its house, and knocked on the door of the place it still thought of, in whatever way it was capable of thinking, as its own. I sat in my kitchen at 7 a.m. with both hands around a mug of tea and tried to decide how I felt about that. What I felt, and I want to be precise about this because it surprised me, was not terror. What I felt was grief. A sudden, unexpected, almost overwhelming sadness for a woman I'd never met. For the shape of her loneliness, the insomnia, the 2 a.m. walks, the husband gone since 1999, the 23 years alone in a house that had probably once been full, for whatever remained of her in those boards and walls and the uneven floorboard just inside that door. The grief surprised me so much it shook something loose, some wall of fear I'd been maintaining. That evening I did something that should have been frightening and wasn't. I opened the office door. I stood in the doorway, and I spoke into the room. "Dorothy," I said, "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if this is real or if I've completely lost my grip. But if you're here, you can have this room back. I'm going to move my desk. This can be yours again." The house was silent. I went to bed. This brings me to last night, and to why I'm writing this. I moved my desk into the spare bedroom yesterday afternoon. It took 2 hours and the help of a furniture dolly I borrowed from my neighbor on the right, who asked no questions and for whom I was deeply grateful. By evening, the room at the end of the hall was cleared. My monitors, my drawing tablet, my cables and reference books, and the small cactus I keep on the windowsill, all of it moved. I left a chair in there, an old armchair I'd found at a market, recovered in a dark blue fabric, comfortable and worn. I put it by the window, facing the garden. The way you'd arrange a chair for someone who wanted to sit and look out at something. I made the room as peaceful as I could, and then I closed the door softly and I went to bed. At 2:17 a.m., almost exactly the time of that very first night 6 weeks ago, I woke up. The footsteps had already begun. I lay still and I listened, and I counted. 14 steps along the hallway, past my door, not stopping, not hesitating, on all the way to the end of the landing. There was a pause, and then the sound of a door opening. Not my door, the office door, the room at the end of the hall. The soft sound of the latch disengaging, the whisper of wood over a carpet as the door swung inward. And then the sound I will hear for the rest of my life. Footsteps, very soft now, crossing the threshold. The particular creak of the uneven board just inside the door. Movement across the floor. The subtle settling sound of weight, a full, real, present weight, being lowered into a chair. And then silence. Complete, total, unbroken silence. No more footsteps, no more knocking. No more pacing the hallway worn into the boards of this house like a groove in a record. The same loop, the same midnight walk. The same reaching for a room that was no longer hers. Just silence. I lay in the dark for a long time, listening to the house breathe. And slowly, gradually, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in this house since the footsteps started. I felt alone, actually peacefully alone. I fell asleep. I woke this morning and I went to the room at the end of the hall. The door was closed, exactly as I'd left it. The armchair was facing the window, exactly as I'd positioned it. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing had moved. The small layer of dust on the windowsill was undisturbed. But the room felt different. Settled. Complete. The way a room feels when it is being used rather than waiting to be. I don't know what Dorothy Hale was. I don't know if she was a ghost in any sense I could explain or defend or make logical sense of. I don't know if what I experienced for 6 weeks was supernatural, psychological, structural, or something so far outside the available categories that none of those words fit. What I know is this: a woman lived alone in this house for 23 years. She walked her hallway when she couldn't sleep. She sat in a room and looked out at a garden she had tended for decades. And when she died, when her body was found and her house was cleared and repainted and sold and filled with someone else's things, some part of that routine remained. Some groove worn so deep into the fabric of a life that even death hadn't smoothed it out. She wasn't haunting me. She was just trying to get back to her chair, and last night, and when I finally understood that and made space for it, she did. I don't know if she'll walk again tonight. I don't know if whatever this was is finished or just pausing. But right now, sitting in my kitchen with the morning coming through the window and the house genuinely quiet around me for the first time in 6 weeks, I feel something unexpected and strange and real. I feel like I'm sharing this house with someone, and I think that's okay. And there it is. Claire Ashford's account. 6 weeks, 14 footsteps, 1 empty chair by a window. Now, I want you to sit with the part that actually gets under your skin, because it's not the knocking, it's not the camera that recorded nothing. It's the neighbor. Gerald, 30 years on that street. He knew Dorothy. He's the one who called in the welfare check. He heard Claire mention the word unusual, and he closed the door without a word, because he already knew. He had always known. Which means the footsteps weren't new. Which means whoever lived in that house before Claire heard them too. Sleep well tonight, Neurofear family. If you can, smash that like button if this story stayed with you. Comment. Tell us where you are watching from and what time it is right now. We read every single one. Subscribe to Neurofear HQ. Hit the bell for all notifications. New horror every week. Share this with someone who needs to lose some sleep tonight. Welcome to Neurofear headquarters. You are one of us now.